بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وآله وأصحابه ومن والاه. To continue, I reiterate again that our deen, our sharia, is the most beautiful expression of the balance between what is rational and what is spiritual. It's a balance between rationality and spirituality. It is not spiritual without being rational. And it's not rational without being spiritual. The two aspects are so beautifully intertwined and interwoven and brought together in this message of the last of the messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why the way I like to put it is when we study fiqh matters or usuli fiqh matters, all matters that have to do with rational dimensions, we must always have learn to put that first in an envelope, which is a spiritual envelope, inside of it, not outside of it, not without it. But the rational is to be put, enveloped in an envelope of the spiritual dimension as taught and as emphasized by our sharia, in our deen. And that's why, as we said, when we perform our salah, when we come to the masjid, when we practice the dhikr of Allah Azza wa Jal, all of that is intended to help us develop and build that envelope. Develop and build and make that envelope so that I emotionally and experientially I am aware of Allah's watchfulness over me. I'm aware that what I'm studying is to become spiritually a closer individual to Allah Azza wa Jal, to ameliorate and to modify and to change my akhlaq, my internal image, my characteristics, my traits, and consequently that would affect my words and my actions. I should not learn things or do things without these being ever present in my mind and in my heart. I must not learn these things in isolation from the spiritual dimension. If I do that, fil haqiqah, in reality I'm not different than a so-called secular person. Secular means of this world. That's what literally secular means, of this world. That is a person who does things and thinks of things only from the perspective of this world, in this world, for this world. That's a secular, worldly. We, as Muslims, must do better than that. We must take the secular, the worldly, and the secular dimension of Sharia, meaning the dimension of Sharia that deals with worldly matters. That's what I call the secular aspect of Sharia. We must take that, like transactions, dealings, تصرفات وهكذا, all of these things. These are معاملات دنيوية تتعلق بهذه الدنيا. We must do that while connected to the realm of the spiritual, the realm of the akhirah. We must do and understand and practice the worldly matters in the context of our spiritual awareness. Always. And that spiritual awareness, first of all, is about the tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. The oneness, the affirmation, the active affirmation of the oneness of Allah Azza wa Jal. And when I say that, we don't only mean by that an intellectual concept of tawheed, or an academic concept of tawheed, or a philosophical concept of tawheed, or a dialectic, kalami concept of tawheed. And that anybody can do, anybody can learn, anybody can do that. Even a kafir can be an expert in Tawheed, theoretically speaking, intellectually speaking, philosophically speaking, dialectically speaking. That's not what we are meant to do. What we're meant is to experience that Tawheed. That Tawheed becomes something of a hal, of a mood, of an emotion, of a feeling, of a personal experience inside of me. When I say Al-Rahim, Al-Wahid, Al-Aziz, Al-Qahhar, Al-Ghani, Al-Mughni, Al-Kareem, these are the asma of Allah Azza wa Jal. That Tawheed require that inside of me, not only intellectually, I feel the concept of the Rahim is Allah, the Rahim. The Rahim. And I feel that. And the consequences of that, therefore, in my life. In the context of this Tawheed, there will be akhlaq, beautiful akhlaq. In the context of those akhlaq, I shall therefore always study and learn and understand and practice the rational aspects of my deen. Again, and we shall keep repeating this concept, and it needs always to be repeated, and then to experience that's a different issue. To repeat it and to know it is easier. To experience it is struggle, and dua, etc., etc. So please remember, anything we do, anything we study, scholars and students and Kalam must always remind themselves of this foundation, of this requirement, and that many of us unfortunately do not do. So it is in this context, again, Jazakumullah khair, at least two of you summarize and mention that as part of what we have covered last time and the time before. We start first with a spiritual envelope, and then we talk about the some fiqh rational issues as we are dealing with, as some of you are hearing. And that issue of the issues we were discussing that are very essential because of what is happening and the way we learn, what we read, etc. We looked at a few issues, of which the last was looking at the hadith da'if. Because the sources, what are the sources of our Islamic knowledge? Yes? Quran and Sunnah, right? Khalas. You are not here, so the answer is wrong. What are the sources of our knowledge? Quran and Sunnah. Everybody says that, Quran and Sunnah. When the alim, expert alim, al-mujtahid says Quran and Sunnah, we have learned what they mean. But when we say Quran and Sunnah, if it's not in the Quran and the Sunnah, khalas, throw it away. One time a person asked me a question years ago, and about a job in some place. He said, is it okay to have a job in such a place? I said, yes. I thought of it, and I said, I believe, yes, it is. He says, where is it in the Quran and in the Sunnah where this job is halal? I mean, just like that. This is the 20th century, 21st century. I knew where the mind was coming from. I said, Assalamu alaikum. May I see you later in a better situation or never? Because in the Quran, in the Sunnah, there isn't everything specifically mentioned, as we have elaborated, as our expert ulama have understood from the Quran and the Sunnah. The specific cases in life are innumerable. The more we live, the more specific cases. But in the Quran and the Sunnah, surely there are the general principles, at least for everything. and some specific answers for many things, but not for everything. It's well established. That's why when we say what are our sources of Islamic knowledge, the answer of a basic student of ilm should not be Quran and Sunnah, should be what? Kevin? The question is, what are our sources of Islamic knowledge? Yes. Started with what? What did you start with? Okay. Now don't do the opposite. Don't go the other way. And the sources of our Islamic knowledge become Ijma', Qiyas, this, kaza, and Quran and Sunnah gone. So it's, alhamdulillah, no, you don't mean that. But please don't even in words use that. Sources are Quran and Sunnah and Ijma' and Qiyas and Istihsan and Salih Mursala and Sadd al-Dhara'i and Istishab and etc. It's not one or two. All of these are in accordance with the Mujtahidun, unless you become a unique Mujtahid of the times, different than the 14th century that have passed, and you invent something else. Well, that's up to the expert, the ulama, to respond to you. Well, first of all, that would be a break of ijma' up to that point about the sources of our Islamic knowledge. So the sources of our Islamic knowledge are all these. All of them. So if a study of an issue as dealt with by expert scholars, and remember expert scholars is a word I use for mujtahid in the Usuli Fiqh sense in accordance to our traditions. That when there is an issue to be dealt with, if it is not specifically dealt with in the Quran or in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, there are many things like that. That does not make it something out of the bounds of Islam. If the other sources, adillah shar'iyya, the other shar'i sources, the other sources of ilm, of knowledge, of Islamic knowledge, when they are used, there is an answer through that, through ijma' or through qiyas or through istihsan or through this or this or that. We have done that. We repeat it. It's okay. It's to repeat these things. That's fine. That we have to keep in mind. So for someone who says, it's not in the Quran, it's not in the Sunnah, therefore throw it away, هذا لا يقول به هو لا يقول به من؟ لا ما أقول أحد بل قال به ناس لا يقول به مجتهد, an expert scholar. But العوام والغوغاء منا من يقول به لجهلنا ولعدم علمنا. أما المجتهد فلا يمكن لمن وصل مرتبة الاجتهاد أن يتلفظ بشيء مثل هذا. لا يمكن. As to الآحاد من الناس أو من طلبة علم أو من كذا طلبة علم مع نقص فيهم ممكن يقول هذا الكلام. أما المجتهد فلا يمكن أن يتلفظ بمثل هذا. No way. So if it's not in the Quran and in the Sunnah, that's one thing. But if in the Quran and in the Sunnah there is an answer opposite to what you are reasoning, khalas. The Quran and the Sunnah take precedence. Always. They are the primary sources of our knowledge. The primary sources of our knowledge. The Quran and the Sunnah. Actually, the ultimate primary source of knowledge is the Quran, خلاص. The ultimate primary source of knowledge is the Quran. How do we know that Sunnah is a source of knowledge? The Quran. In the Quran, the texts are abundant. That's why the mujtahidun, the expert scholars, looking at the Quran, let's say, it is from the Quran also, they derived the authoritativeness of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then using that, then use the Sunnah as well to indicate also that the Sunnah is a primary source of our knowledge. But not only the Quran and the Sunnah. Because the Quran and the Sunnah have indicated to us and shown to us, to the expert ulama, that there are other means that the expert scholars can use to derive Shari'i verdicts, Shari'i ahkam, when they do not exist in the Quran or in the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Please keep that in mind. So for example, to say that something is bid'ah, for example, and we had an entire seminar on this issue, to say something is bid'ah because it is not in the Quran and it is not in the Sunnah. This is even more prevalent nowadays and in these last decades. Many decades. It is not in the Quran, it is not in the Sunnah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not do it, for example, and the af'al of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are Sunnah, the acts of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam are also Sunnah. Therefore, it is bid'ah in the Shari'i sense, in the negative sense, meaning this is wrong. Truly, when we look at the expert scholars, rahimahullah ta'ala, through the centuries, from earliest on the Sahaba down even to nowadays of expert scholars, we find a sort of an ijma', of a consensus in the way they understand Quran and Sunnah, that that's not the case. But we cannot call bid'ah, meaning in the Shari'i sense, meaning it is wrong, because bid'ah is a word in Arabic, which means what? Something new. And something new is not bad by itself. So bid'ah, bid'ah, this is something new. But sometimes it is used to mean simply something negative in the Sharia context. But sometimes, be careful, as I said before during the seminar, you might be reading in the works of ulama and say, the alim says this is bid'ah. They don't necessarily mean this is bid'ah in the Shari'i sense. It simply means it is something that was not there before. This is not necessarily, underline my word, necessarily a statement about it being wrong or right. It was not there. But, is it makruh? Is it haram? Is it mustahab? Is it mubah? That's a different issue. If it is mubah or mustahab or even wajib, then we don't call it bid'ah in the technical sense, etc. I don't want to go back to that subject. Maybe we'll do that some other time again. But we have, if you review the seminar records, which was like for a day or two, I don't remember. There is plenty of that, inshallah ta'ala, to suffice us, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, in course, the expert ulama. So, if it is not something in the Quran or in the Sunnah, that doesn't make it wrong. Because the Quran and the Sunnah are not the only two sources of Shari'i reasoning. Something may not be in the Quran and in the Sunnah, but it has a basis in other Shari'i sources. And therefore, there are some Shari'i evidence. Shari'i evidence is not only Quran and Sunnah. Shari'i evidence, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' or Qiyas or Istislah or Sadd al-Zara'i or kada. Then if there's nothing from that, khalas, that's a different issue. The expert ulama know what to say. Is that clear? Is that very clear? And this is what the expert ulama have always been about. And of course, for those of us who have some logic and some information, of course, it sounds very sound and very logical. Now, it is in that context, again, that we spoke of al-hadith al-da'if, etc., because it has become so pervasive nowadays in the circles of those who learn through certain, those of us who learn through certain avenues and certain sources. We have developed this notion that we're told and we learned and we read and we heard that the only hadith that are used in any ways in matters of our deen are al-hadith, al-sahih and al-hasan. The rest is garbage. If it is da'if, unused. And it is prevalent. Many people nowadays, that's exactly du'a, some so-called, we call scholars, but not expert scholars. Many at this time, in this era, started about 50 years ago, at the most 70 years ago or so. And with time, for some reason, historic, political, economic, etc., this view and other views have become the standard. And upon investigation, it has never been standard amongst the early experts of scholarship, those who developed the science of textual criticism, including hadith criticism. That has never been the case like that. On the contrary, there's so much of science in it. The gist of it, with having given you some examples, is that no, the hadith da'if, first of all, da'if is many levels. Like sahih is many levels. Like hasan is many levels. Da'if is many levels. What is the worst kind of da'if, of weak hadith? Mawdu'. The spurious hadith. Fabricated. Mawdu'. That is, in the chain of the hadith there is someone who is a liar. Established by all critiques to be a liar. That's mawdu'. That all of the ulama say rejected. But let me say one thing even here. You may go and read this hadith is mawdu'. هذا السند فيه وضاع موضوع. This hadith, you read that hadith with that sanad, it says it's موضوع. خلاص, rejected. Actually, what is wrong here? This statement is wrong. It should not be like this. Exactly. Is that logical and that simple? Yet I know in readings, in texts, in books, scholars and some authors and writers, this hadith is mawdu'. And actually that sanad, that chain of narration is a chain of narration which can be and was judged as mawdu'. But the same context, the same meaning of the text, the same text through another sanad, that sanad is not mawdu', whatever it is. Could be simply da'if, but not mawdu'. Could be hasan, could be even, mind you, there are many texts, when you look at all their turuq, all their asanid, you find their asanid, there is sahih, hasan, da'if and mawdu'. Keep in mind that you may read sometimes a hadith, if you're to research and looking at all different turuq, etc., you find a hadith in a certain meaning, which has many asanid, one or many asanid that is sahih, and one or many asanid that is hasan, and I'm not saying or, and one or many asanid that are da'if simply, and one or many asanid that are mawdu'. Guess what? Somebody reads the text with a sanad that is mawdu'. And that happened and happens in the literature. And says this text is mawdu'. And it spreads like fire. And khalas, it is mawdu'. Whereas some text, that text may be mawdu' with that sanad, but it has asanid that are even sahih. And therefore the text is sahih. Khalas, if there is one sanad that is sahih, then the text is sahih. You ignore all of the rest. Now when we say we reject mawdu', with this in mind. And who usually does all this research? When even some scholars, I'm not saying expert scholars, some scholars make the mistake nowadays of saying this is mawdu' and basing judgment upon it without having found out that there are other asanid that are not mawdu'. Even scholars have fallen into that. So what about the regular people who simply hear what they are told and read what they are told, and then come, some of us, and express that as though it is the ultimate truth because I read it in a book or because my scholar said so? That happens to all of us. When we sometimes like to play the role of expert scholars. Or give me the text. Okay, I'll give you the text. There is a text. سنده موضوع. That's what I know. خلاص, we said so. جزاك الله خيرا. That's evidence. But you see what can happen? So I was meaning to say, and the hadith da'if is also many levels. There is the worst of it is mawdu'. And what is the least weak of it? Something called, the ulama call it sometimes, هذا حديث مشبه بالحسن. حديث ضعيف مشبه بالحسن. This is a weak hadith and has a semblance of a Hasan hadith. In other words, the weakness is very, very, very weak itself. The weakness is very weak, very limited. It's not very weak something. Let's say sometimes the ulama give grades in some of the way they grade in ilm al-jarh wa al-ta'dil. So this hadith is of a grade in weakness, of a grade, let's say 4.7. While Hasan, let's say Hasan starts at 5.1 or 5.7. That's Hasan. But what about a hadith that is 4.9? Let's say. Just to know the concept of da'if. They classify it as da'if because it's not Hasan. And many reasons why. So it cannot be rationally acceptable to say that every hadith da'if is logically rejectable. It's impossible. I mean, you're equating the mawdu' to one, the strength of which is very close to a Hasan. This is untenable. This is irrational. Correct? It's irrational to say 0 is equal to 4.9 or 4 or 5. It's irrational. Because da'if, when it is not mawdu', means there is a chance, there is a probability that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it. And there is a probability that he did not say it. And the more the weakness is smaller, the more that probability increases that he said it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Even hadith sahih. When we say hadith sahih, there are levels. What is the highest level of hadith sahih? Mutawatir. Mawdu' the all the way. Mutawatir is the highest level of hadith sahih. And then the grades of sahih. Sahih means, in probabilistically speaking, that the probability that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it is good one. Is greater than, if you can put it in numbers, greater than, what do you think? Greater than 0.5. Greater than 0.5. And less than 1. And mutawatir is almost 1. But you see, it's probability. الظن الراجع لذلك الحديث الصحيح عند عند الأصوليين من العلماء يفيد الظن الراجح. That it imparts that the probability is greater than simply half. الظن الراجح, that's what it is. لا يفيد اليقين. يفيد الظن الراجح. Similarly, الحديث الضعيف يفيد, as they say, some of them, they say يفيد الظن المرجوح. But الظن المرجوح doesn't mean you give it away. It is still, probabilistically speaking, still possible that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said it. In reality, that Allah knows, a hadith da'if could be, actually, in reality could be sahih. But technically, the technical analysis shows it is weak in the sanad. But in the haqiqah of it, the content of it could be sahih with Allah Azza wa Jal. So with all of these concepts and more, the expert ulama have argued logically that you do not reject hadith da'if because it is da'if. Reject it in totality. That's why they had conditions for that, which nowadays some people have said, some people of ilm nowadays have said, that if it is da'if, completely rejected. In other words, they made it equal to mawdu'. This is rationally untenable, logically untenable, spiritually extremely rough and dangerous. Spiritually extremely rough and dangerous. Because there is, it seems, no wazi' inside, no spiritual wazi' inside to be afraid to be ending up rejecting the very word of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with that probability. So, well, you don't pay attention to it. You think you're sure. And you cannot be sure rationally, and yet you reject it. So that means there is no fear to be wrong. Do you see my point? If something probabilistically is possible, even with a slight probability, and I act as though it doesn't exist in matters of deen, this is what? This is lack of fear from Allah Azza wa Jal. Lack of fear for the consequences. And for these reasons and more, the expert ulama, yes, from Al-Imam Malik and before, and Sufyanan and Rahmahullah Ta'ala, and Abu Hanifa and Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, Imam Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah, Nasa'i, كلهم Ibn Hibban, Al-Hakim, Ibn Khuzaymah, down the line, in all of the madhahib. Down the line, all the statements are there that they have never rejected the hadith al-da'if in totality. Never. And we have shown examples where they actually acted upon hadith da'if in ahkam. Not only in fada'il al-a'mal. In ahkam. And we gave examples from Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad. And down the line I gave you examples from Ibn Abd al-Barr, I don't know if I mentioned that. The great Hafiz, rahimahullah ta'ala, and al-Bukhari himself, etc. With those conditions, as long as there is no other authentic text opposing that weak text, and there is no other authentic text in this matter. And other reasons that hadith da'if is accepted to be acted upon. Fada'il al-a'mal, that goes without saying. Do you know al-adab al-mufrad of Imam al-Bukhari? If you studied some of al-adab al-mufrad, what's in al-adab al-mufrad? Because it's about what? It's about what? Sorry? Fada'il al-a'mal. It's about certain فضائل في عبادات فضائل في المعاملات etc. الأدب المفرد. That's by Imam al-Bukhari. The top the top of the galaxy or the top of the pyramid of the experts in textual criticism. And that al-Adab al-Mufrad is filled with hadith da'ifa. Didn't he know that? He didn't know that this hadith is da'if and this hadith is da'if. On the contrary, he says it is da'if. But he's using that as evidence in matters of fada'il al-a'mal. And it suffices to say this, khalas. Because the rest, if I say this, as long as what I'm saying is correct, you can double check, of course, that the rest of the ulama, that's what they have said. Imam Ahmad, his Musnad has those. His Kitab al-Zuhd has a lot of those, especially. Imam Ahmad uses Hadith al-Da'if also, as I said, like the others, also in ahkam with proper conditions. Now, just so far we are repeating, but the repetition is useful. But also, we said we have always to have, best recourse is to have recourse to the expert ulama. And if they differ, and we are not expert ulama, some of us, even this that I'm sharing with you, may not understand. Some of us may not understand fully. So what's the solution? I'm not a mujtahid. You want to be mujtahid? Spend all your life. Like you want to be mujtahid in medicine? It's not enough to be a doctor, to be a physician. Physician is not mujtahid in medicine. You want to be a mujtahid in medicine, there are other things to do. And other studies to do. A physicist, PhD in physics, is not a mujtahid in physics. It's not a mujtahid in physics. It's a sort of a good scholar in this and that, depending on how they graduated. But you may with time may or may not become a mujtahid in physics. كذلك الشرع. To become an expert scholar, a mujtahid, it's a lifelong endeavor, and one might never end up being a mujtahid. Lifelong endeavor, and one may not end up being a mujtahid. And alhamdulillah, mujtahids in this ummah have existed. So when matters are of any issues, we should always look at what the expert scholars have said. Not what is your dalil. What does it mean? That's what we're learning. Dalil could be, to those who are not expert ulama, very, very deceiving. An entrapment. Because we don't know all what we need to know of how a fatwa is formulated. Of which we're saying few things, which, we find out that most of us don't know. And many people who write, and also some of these things, they don't know. And if We know sometimes the way we apply what we know is also wrong. Some people know these rules, but some people are more intelligent than others in the way those rules are applied. Now here, for example, Da'if, okay. This is a text. And an expert scholar says, let's say we accept this to be an expert scholar, says this is Da'if. Is that the end of the research? No. Why? What should I do? What should a serious student do? Look at other expert scholars in the field. What have they said? And lo and behold, in this field also, you may find an expert scholar in the field of hadith criticism who says this is da'if, and another one says this is not da'if. This is hasan, for example, or even sahih. And there are tons of examples like that. Did you know that? So hadith da'if is not, or sahih or kada. And there are levels of expertise. Now if a scholar of nowadays says this hadith is sahih or da'if, and an expert scholar of the early times where that science was formulated says the opposite, which one weighs more in a rational court of science? There is such a thing. There are levels of expertise. And if Al-Bukhari says this person in the Sanad is thiqah, this person in the Sanad, scholar who is in the Sanad, in the chain of narration, is thiqah, and a name of, say nowadays, and I'm actually giving actual examples. And if a name of a scholar nowadays says, no, that, even if Al-Bukhari said he's thiqah, that actually is not thiqah. That's a da'if scholar. I'm not an expert. And I have here the expert opinion of Al-Bukhari and the expert opinion of someone else, without mentioning names nowadays. Which one weighs heavier? As far as we know, I think it's Al-Bukhari. Not I think, because I know the expert scholars have said that the weight of Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala is the strongest weight when it comes to textual criticism. They have used sometimes this ibara, that if a person, a scholar in the chain of narration, that was mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari, they say, هذا تجاوز القنطرة. هذا تجاوز القنطرة. He said, this scholar, he crossed the bridge. In other words, if Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala mentions this scholar in a Sahih hadith, in his Sahih, in the chain of narration, that person has crossed the bridge. In other words, all the criticism and research for criticism now is false. He crossed the bridge. He crossed the bridge. He arrived in the realm of الثقات. لذلك روى له البخاري. Bukhari used him as a reference in his Sahih in particular. So, yes, sometimes that is a difference of judgment. But who is judging? We should look at who is judging. And even if 3 expert scholars say this text is da'if, and 10 expert scholars of the same caliber or more say this is not da'if, this is hasan or sahih, what should we do? For example, the majority of scholars, that's safer. That's safer. And the best we can do, that in this text, since the expert scholars differed, even though there is more who say it is one way and the others less say it is the other way. Even though it is like that, the best we can say is, well, those who are following the opinion of two expert scholars that it is this or that should not say to the others, you're wrong. On what basis? The expert scholars between themselves, they can do that. But you cannot. On the basis of what the expert scholars have confirmed, and they have confirmed their differences, confirmed the differences, you cannot say this renders this inoperative. No. Take this, alhamdulillah, you take this, alhamdulillah. But if there is that spiritual envelope in which we put things, Allah will help our hearts clear to see eventually where the truth with Allah is, this one or that one. So sometimes they even differ in that. في علم الجرح والتعديل, in the science of criticism and of criticism of each scholar as to their levels of accuracy and their levels of reliability, and that is moral reliability. Sometimes you find some scholars say, oh, this scholar is da'if. This scholar, and another scholar says, this is da'if. Oh, arawa al-munkarat. And then you have other scholars who say, this is thiqah. This is a thiqah scholar, a trustworthy scholar. Or this is a good one. Or many of them, in other words, judged him positively. And some judged him negatively. Now, can we say, therefore, this person is negative? No. Can we say, therefore, clearly this person is fully thiqah? Honestly, even statistically, not really. But we cannot say this is da'if, no, this is fully thiqah. We may say, therefore, when it is like this person is at least in between, hasan of hadith. When that happens, you cannot pass the judgment in the absolute sense one way or the other, but it's something in between. And in between is usually hasan. It's not da'if, especially if many have spoken well of this scholar in terms of accuracy and in terms of morality. So sometimes you read some of the ulama of nowadays or others say, so this is da'if, this person is da'if, this. Fine, khalas, but you're not experts. Don't stop at that. Find what other experts have said. And sometimes when we research, we find actually, well, that scholar for one reason or the other, either he forgot or didn't know for some other reason, mentioned only in his research the negative statements, mentioned only the negative assessments of some scholars about him, and missed to research and find if there were positive, approving statements of scholars about this person. And if you find there were actually many, wow, that makes a huge difference of a judgment. And there are many times some scholars of nowadays who pass a judgment about a hadith on the basis of not enough research, simply about what the expert scholars have said about X or Y person in the sanad. As an example, and I conclude with this for tonight, inshallah. The hadith, من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. Said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. The one who visits my grave, my shafa'ah is guaranteed for him or her, inshallah. Allahumma ja'alna minhum. Well, this text with the sanad that was discussed, you find out that some ulama, rahimahullah ta'ala, of after Al-Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, like his student, Ibn Abd al-Hadi, Shaykh al-Imam Ibn Abd al-Hadi, and then what he said was copied and basically repeated by many scholars nowadays, names of which no need to mention, rahimahullah ta'ala jami'an. In that sanad of that hadith, all the Qur'an go to one called Musa ibn Hilal al-Abdi. Musa ibn Hilal al-Abdi took it from Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari. This is not Abdullah ibn Umar, the companion. Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari took it from Imam Nafi'. You know the Imam Nafi', teacher of Imam Malik. From Nafi', Imam Nafi' took it from Abdullah ibn Umar, from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this is a sanad. And also this sanad comes from Musa ibn Hilal al-Abdi, from Ubaydullah ibn Umar al-Umari. The first one was what? Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari. This one is Ubaydullah ibn Umar al-Umari, and they are brothers. From also Nafi', great Imam Nafi', from Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, من زار قبري وجبت له شفاعتي. Some ulama who rejected this text without going into other reasons have argued Musa ibn Hilal al-Abdi is a majhul. Majhul is a technical term in hadith which means something like this, that in scholarship we don't know enough of this scholar in terms of not only who he is, but in terms of, either in terms of who he is, second, in terms of what his level of scholarship was. We don't have any information about that. They call it majhul, unknown. Unknown doesn't mean we don't know his name and his father. We might know all of that, but it is majhul in the sense we have mentioned. And that is a form of weakness. They say first Musa ibn Hilal is this, majhul. Those nowadays who rejected that hadith, like Imam al-Albani rahimahullah ta'ala and others, have argued the same way. Khalas, that's way. But other scholars rahimahullah ta'ala of old, many of them of old, I mentioned one of them, Imam Subki for example, and before him and after him, rahimahullah ta'ala said no, it's not the case. This hadith actually is at least Hasan, and maybe even Sahih. And Musa ibn Hilal, no, actually it's not a majhul. He's well known. And then you find all the references. Why he's not majhul? Musa ibn Hilal, rawa anhu at least 15 people, of whom at least 8 were thiqat. Those of you who know this jargon, if you do. Musa ibn Hilal was a narrator, a teacher to at least 15 scholars, all of whom mentioned, reported a hadith from him. Many of those, which I actually verified personally, many of whom, at least in my findings, at least 8 to 10 of them were thiqat. This, by the standards of the scholars of criticism, this makes the person not only not majhul, but even reliable. So here's an example. And the expert scholars, other expert scholars says, well, no, he's not majhul at all. That's, the others have made a mistake. هذه واحدة. That I personally verified. Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari. They say Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari is weak. His brother, Ubaydullah, is thiqah. Great. Highly trustworthy, highly reliable, highly accurate. But he, Abdullah ibn Umar, they say, is weak. The other group of scholars say, actually, no, he's not that weak. And they have arguments, all the arguments of which, that even if he were weak, now this is something a little more specific, even if he were weak, this narration, his teacher in it was, we said, Nafi', Imam Nafi'. And the expert scholars have said, when Abdullah ibn Umar reports from Nafi', he is good. And of whom, those who say that the great critique, Yahya ibn Ma'in, rahimahullah ta'ala, who said that. And in this case, the riwayah of Abdullah ibn Umar is from Nafi', regardless of what they say about him. However, if it is from Nafi', it's always authentic. And this riwayah is from Nafi'. And plus, he's not that weak anyway. There are other things said. You see, therefore the text is at least Hasan of Isnad. Not only that, they have also argued, but actually Musa ibn Hilal related this text once from Abdullah ibn Umar, and another time he said, Ubaydullah ibn Umar. And Ubaydullah ibn Umar is thiqah. Khalas. Even he related it in two ways. Some had a different argument, which again is not so tenable. They say, well, it can't be both. There is an ittirab. The answer is no. There's no ittirab. He related it once from this and once from that. Where is the evidence that said it's a mistake? Especially that others who related this text have related this text, Musa ibn Hilal saying it in this way. And plus, Musa ibn Hilal was not the only one who related this text. There is a mutabi' through Abdullah ibn Umar al-Umari and through Ubaydullah ibn Umar al-Umari. My point is to give you a flavor, to some of you at least, that when a text is said to be weak, it may or may not be weak. We should not, even in the ilm of hadith, we should not have only one source of knowledge. Like we have learned, I hope if you accepted my counsel to you, that in fiqh you should never rely on one source of knowledge. Diversify your sources of knowledge. And so it is in ilm al-hadith. Diversify your sources of knowledge. If al-Imam X and Y nowadays say this is sahih or da'if, don't take it always for granted. And if I find expert hadith, if I'm able to do that research, many of us are not able, unfortunately. And find out that other sources have said otherwise, then I should refrain from passing the judgment that one source passed. And in this case, hadith da'if by one source is hasan or sahih by another source. And therefore, man zara qabri wajabat lahu shafa'ati by itself is sahih or hasan in accordance to many ulama of old or some ulama of old. And again, even if it were da'if, and it is not, depends on the level of also of weakness, there are other texts with other asanid in the same meaning that are weak or even hasan or even close to hasan that are teaching the same thing, other asanid. And the standard and the rule of the ulama, expert scholars of hadith, is that when this happens, the original text that is weak becomes strong. Khalas. Even if all of them, all the chains are weak, all of them, 2 or 3 or 4 are weak, then the text becomes strong, authoritative. And in this case, it happens. And that's what some other expert scholars have said, including in the text, in this text, including one of the great scholars of hadith and faqih and historian, one of the students of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, who disagreed with his teacher, Imam al-Dhahabi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who says the texts together on this issue make the meaning definitely acceptable, for instance. So with this, inshallah ta'ala, also we stop here, and I hope as we are saying these things and repeating some of these things, that they, bi'idhnillah, that we have a better understanding for them, that we appreciate that better, and especially that we put all of this in a spiritual envelope. Don't take the rational alone. The rational alone may make me sometimes so rational that I become irrational. That makes sense to you, because I so rely on my rationality that I can fall into an abyss and thinking I'm still very rational, and when I'm not, sometimes even rational. But if by the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, we implore Allah for that spiritual dimension and envelope, that bi'idhnillah ta'ala, it might and it would help us be safer in our rational judgments, that they are always rational and they don't go beyond what is allowed to them, inshallah ta'ala, because sometimes if we lack that cleanliness in our qulub, our minds get obscured, and it affects the way we think, it affects the way we judge, and then we make mistakes. Some mistakes could be very serious. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. Allah Azza wa Jal bless you all and reward you all, inshallah ta'ala. Again, until the next time we meet next Tuesday, please review the material. Please, if you can, also write summaries, inshallah ta'ala. And then next time we meet, we'll continue either in this subject if you want, or we do other subjects as well, inshallah ta'ala. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.